umkhulu wami wangitshela mina wathi ilanga lake laphilanga phansi kolwandle emandulo lena emandulo mhlaba usemusha laze lashiya amaqanda egolide umcebo wezizwe 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 lashiya amaqanda egolide umcebo wezizwe. Sanbonani, it is a great privilege for me to salute you like this. In my mother tongue, we say Sawubona. Sawubona simply means my spirit honors the spirit in you. I wish to salute you and thank you for all that you have done at a time like this, when there's so much uncertainty in the whole world. You have sacrificed time you could have spent with your own families in order to make a difference, to make sure that the Mansa platform becomes a force to be reckoned with on the African continent. Africa loves you. Africa salutes you. We thank you for that. Siyabonga. In the beginning, when the world was still very young, many will tell you that there was nothing at all. Others will tell you there was complete darkness. But I beg to differ. I believe there was joy and there was promise. They gave birth to rhythm, the very rhythm that keeps our hearts beating, whether we are asleep or awake, whether we are rich or poor. The very rhythm that helps a young baby to take their first steps, or guides the young boy who falls in love with a cowhide drum at a coming-of-age ceremony. The very rhythm that propels the waves of the ocean to keep on changing and growing, coming and going, and yes, they help the seasons to turn over and over, one after another, endlessly throughout time. That same rhythm ignites the very soul of a storyteller. I'm going to tell you a story, right? You knew that already. This story happened not so long ago at a seaside town. A young woman woke up, stepped out of bed, and went to sit on a big rock just outside her home. This was her favorite place to sit, to think, dream, or just be. She was looking at the orange eastern sky. It seemed to smile at her. She smiled right back. She had this feeling that a brand new day was to be born. Something special was going to happen to her. She remembered the many years ago when she was a child, she had asked her grandfather, a miner for many years, Mkhulu, where does gold come from? And why did you have to travel to that faraway place where you worked for years? And why is there no gold near our home? The old man laughed, brushing his white beard. Oh, kahle mzukulu. Please, easy, child of my child. So many questions all at once. Mkhulu, I need to know, she insisted. That was a long time ago, but Mkhulu had answered. Mkhulu said, you see, mtanami, the sun is the greatest gift that the Almighty
Okay, it seems like we may have had a technical error there. Our apologies to you all. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. That was Ms. Tina Mflope from South Africa, who had a very riveting poem talking about the origins of the Mansa name and why we are here today. The story of Mansa Musa, who built his wealth with gold. And that's where the story of Mansa begins, when we are trying to build our wealth in Africa with information. Good morning. My name is Adeze Anyoku, and I'm with the Communications and Events Department at AfreximBank, and this is the operational launch of the Mansa Repository platform. On behalf of the President of AfreximBank, Professor Benedict Orama, the executives, and all staff, I welcome you to the operational launch of the Mansa Repository platform. I'd also like to let you know that this event is being live streamed on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and Vimeo. So what is Mansa? Many of you might be asking. Well, it's the Africa Due Diligence Digital Data Repository platform, my apologies, and it provides a single source of Africa-wide primary data required for customer diligence and KYC checks for all our African counterparties. In short, it's a one-stop shop for sharing and accessing our due diligence data. This is necessary, obviously, on our continent today. It's going to help to build trust, impact trade, for transition, and of course, for transformation. Now, I won't say too much about Mansa right now because I'm going to sound a bit redundant. We have a lot of information to share with you. We have a couple of videos to share as well. And I think you're going to find this a very, very informative event today. Before we go into that, however, let me go through a few housekeeping items. For those of you who are not familiar with this platform, the windows in front of you, this platform is very user-friendly. There are 4 windows which you'll see. Each one of those windows can be minimized, maximized, or resized. So please.
Mansa, Africa's due diligence data platform, is named after Mansa Musa, who was the 10th emperor of the Mali Empire. He is credited with placing Africa on the world map and opening up many.
I apologize for that. It seems we're having a bit of some technical issues going on today. As I was saying, for housekeeping, there are 4 windows which you see in front of you. Each one of them can be minimized, maximized, or resized to your suiting. So please feel free to play around with that and just make sure you set the platform for what works best for you. If you're logged on a mobile device, I'd implore you to please switch to a personal computer or a laptop. You'd have a much better experience with that. There is a Q&A chat box at the bottom of your screen. Please feel free to, we're going to have a roundtable discussion today, so one of the questions are going to be fed by the anchor. However, please feel free to post your comments in there, how you feel the event is going. Let us know exactly how the information that you're getting, how impactful it would be for you. And then, of course, feel free to post any comments, and we'll get back to you if there are questions that we're not going to be able to answer or that the panelists might not be able to get to. We'll be able to follow up with you on there as well. Lastly, there is translation for the event today. On the screen, there should be a closed captioning button. Feel free to click on whichever language. We are translating in French and Arabic, so you can get that closed captioning going across your screen in the language that suits you. Lastly, at the end of the event, there will be a survey, So please feel free to fill that out or just take a minute if you could, and to help us bring you better events in the future. So we're going to go into the video right now to tell you a little bit more about Mansa and what impact it will have on our continent. Tani, can you run that video, please?
Mansa, Africa's due diligence data platform, is named after Mansa Musa, who was the 10th emperor of the Mali Empire. He is credited with placing Africa on the world map and opening up many trade routes in the 14th century, as during his reign, the Malian Empire may have been the largest producer of gold in the world. He is said to be the only man ever to control the flow of gold between Africa and the Mediterranean. Today, information is the new gold, and the MANSA repository provides a single source of Africa-wide primary data required to conduct customer due diligence checks on African counterparties. It facilitates the availability of Know Your Customer (KYC) information of African entities. Whilst promoting good governance practices, the MANSA platform delivers insight into Africa with the ultimate aim of increasing trade. It does this through access to intelligence on due diligence to enable trade, as well by revealing the investment environment and opportunities to promote trade. Today, MANSA aspires to leave a legacy for trade through enhanced trading relationships and changing the perception of risk on the continent. MANSA features Africa-focused data and information, online access, one-stop place for sharing and accessing of due diligence data, collated information for KYC checks in line with global standards, self-service onboarding of contributors and subscribers, fully automated customer due diligence (CDD) profile workflow, independent corroboration process for contributed data and information, availability of country profiles and investment climate, single window to access investment promotion agencies of all African countries, access to top intra-African traded products. The MANSA's key players include AfreximBank, the operator of the platform, contributors, financial institutions, corporates and small and medium-sized enterprises, SMEs, who voluntarily contribute their data on the repository, subscribers, consumers of the data and information shared on the repository. Subscription is open to all after verification of access. Verifiers, entities that have coordinating or regulatory authorities, as well as associations, registries and credible market entities, such as top 4 firms, credit bureaus, corporate affairs commission, stock exchanges, and others. The benefits of MANSA are numerous in addressing today's trade challenges, the most important being, for subscribers, one-stop access to CDD information on African counterparties, smoothening of African entities' customer onboarding, reduced compliance costs, consistency of CDD information across various entities in Africa through standardized templates in line with global best practices and standards, provision of visibility on ultimate beneficial owners, UBO. For contributors, enhanced regulatory compliance through use of standardized template, ensuring consistency of customer due diligence information, CDD. Reduced regulatory risk. Increase in transparency, potentially leading to expansion of trade or business relationships in Africa and the rest of the world. Promotion of the integrity of your organization and business owners through credible and independently corroborated data, potentially reducing current high barriers to access to capital, particularly for SMEs. Reduced compliance costs. For Africa, vis-à-vis the development impact, governance, Africa-wide impact, risk management, trade promotion, single primary source for KYC. In the final analysis, MANSA is a digital platform that aims to leave a legacy for trade on the continent by addressing de-risking and changing perceptions through providing insight into Africa in the form of intelligence on due diligence data for enhanced regulatory compliance, as well as information on investing in Africa. Its ultimate aim is to enable increased trade with Africa and in Africa. MANSA, Africa's due diligence data platform.
So there you have it, ladies and gentlemen, the MANSA repository platform. It will increase trade and impact trade within and outside of Africa as well. So we've listened to what it sets out to do, what it provides, and the benefits that will be reaped by participating on this MANSA repository platform. For furtherance of this event, however, we've assembled a power-packed panel of fantastic individuals and panelists to engage in a roundtable discussion. They come from different sectors, financial, multilateral, private sector, and I personally am looking forward to this very engaging conversation. This roundtable is going to be anchored by CNN's anchor, Eleni Jokos. Eleni is based out of Johannesburg, and she's no stranger to your TV screens, I'm sure. She has over 15 years of experience working across TV, digital, radio, and print media. She's interviewed heads of states, heads of institutions, and reported on ground from so many countries across the continent: Nigeria, Kenya, Egypt, Senegal, Rwanda, Ghana, to name a few, so many more. She's coming to us live from Johannesburg, South Africa. Please welcome my sister from my Greek and South African mother, Eleni Jokos. Eleni, the floor is all yours.
Thank you so much, Des. And who would have thought that going virtual would have given us more gremlins to deal with? But it's great that we are able to connect on this platform. Thank you to everyone for joining us today. It is such a fantastic moment, the Mansa launch for AfreximBank and for the whole continent. We are moving forward, ladies and gentlemen, to create a competitive Africa. I also have to say, Siyabonga to Mama Mklope for opening up this conversation this day with wisdom, light, and passion. I look forward to actually watching back the entire poem. And again, it epitomizes African excellence. So fantastic to be with you today. And I also have the pleasure of guiding you through a fantastic dialogue with our top panelists in just a moment. But I want to talk about the name Mansa, and you've got a little sprinkling of it from the video, but I want to just say a couple of things that really struck me in learning more about Mansa Musa. And of course, growing up, you hear about this incredible king and African excellence, but going into the story and delving deep, it wasn't just about the gold production that had made him great. It was the fact that he was able to funnel economic prosperity through gold and into the real economy, creating goods that made Mali incredibly competitive at that time, and also turning Mali into a central hub of prosperity, of intellectuals and architectural spectre. So in the modern era today, Mansa Musa has been revived, so to speak, epitomizing Africa's new gold, data, and the platform is going to centralize the largest collection of verified Africa-wide business data. You've heard a bit about it in that video. We're going to be doing a deep dive about what it means, the practical capabilities, how it will work, and of course, what the long-term goals are here, and what it will take to actually get mass recruitment of companies, and of course ensuring that policymakers are involved as well, and thereby, I guess, in a sense as well, building on Mansa Musa's legacy to expand and create a network from within the heart of Africa through data, creating a competitive continent. So on that note, I would like to welcome Professor Benedict Orama, the president of AfreximBank, Mr. Ade Ayeyemi, the MD and Group CEO at EcoBank, Mr. Stefan Naletambi, the Director for Financial Sector Development at the African Development Bank, Dr. Nagla Nozahi, Governor's Advisor for African Affairs at the Central Bank of Egypt, and Mr. Mansour Ahmed, the President of the Manufacturers Association of Nigeria. Welcome to all of you. Thank you for taking the time. Professor Orama, Mr. President, great to speak to you again. I'm sorry that it has to be virtually, but glad we can have this conversation. Firstly, congratulations to you and the AfreximBank team for this incredible feat and for launch day today. And I know that you were the brains behind naming Mansa after Mansa Musa. So tell me why, and tell me about the inception process.
Yeah,
President Orama.
Thank you very much, Eleni. For joining us today. Let me also use the opportunity to thank my fellow panelists, as well as all those who joined us from different parts of Africa and the world. Yes, the Mansa platform was something that needed to be there even years ago. But the challenges became more daunting, and the need became more compelling in the past few years. If you look at what is going on in the continent and the world generally, you see that the cost of compliance is rising. The marginal cost of compliance for institutions has gone up. And for those who studied economics. You know, when you have such an increase in marginal cost of compliance, what happens then is that, you know, your prices have to go up, and in the process, you ration off the marginal players. And because of the fragmented nature of the Africa, so many small economies, so Africa became the first victim. So many African countries were rationed off. Many could not have access to trade finance anymore. Just to give you an example, the rejection rate for trade finance applications from Africa rose from 1% in 2013 to 20% just about a year or 2 years ago. The participation of African institutions in trade finance also declined from 92% to about 70%, and is still going down. It may surprise you to know that there are some countries in Africa today that do not have access to any payment services. Some of them we're trying to help, but there's only so much we can do. And I know Ade is on this call. He can also attest to it, with also the work that EcoBank is doing and some other banks are doing. But we need everybody to be there. We need all the banks to be as active in Africa as they are elsewhere in the world. And then we're talking of the Africa Continental Free Trade Agreement, the implementation. Of course, January will be the start date for trading. Amongst other challenges that we have to overcome is the trust, you know, that among African businesses. You know, our history, you know, the long years of colonialism and colonization have made us to trust others more than we trust ourselves. We have 55 fragmented economies that hardly dealt with themselves. They know more about Europe, Asia, and the Americas than they know about the people across their borders. So what we want to do is that we wanted to use technology also to begin to bring down the 107 borders that divide us. And MANSA is also a key element towards that effort. Because what we don't know is a monster. If an African businessman shows up, writes a letter to another African businessman in another country, thinks it's a fraud.
Yeah.
Whereas a scammer in somewhere else from another part of the world writes a beautiful letter, and the African business chases it as if it's or her life depends on it. So we need to put that behind us. And as we did that through MANSA, we had to look at what to call that platform, the digital platform. We know that in the 14th century, Africa went into the world map because of
MANSA, Africa's due diligence data platform, is named after Mansa Musa, who was the 10th emperor of the Mali Empire. He is credited with placing Africa on the world map.
I'm so sorry about that. President Moram, I apologize. So please continue.
There was the problem, a technical problem going on. So I was saying that it was Mansa Musa that put Africa on the world map. And he did that not only because he made that famous pilgrimage to Mecca and carried so much gold that even here in Cairo, that the quantity of gold he brought here and distributed here in Egypt kept the price of gold depressed for 12 years. But it wasn't just because of that, but because he was able to trade across the continent as far to the west from where he was to today's Senegal. down to today's Nigeria, all the way to the east, even to what we see today as even Sudan. So he actually connected Africa. He put information about Africa out to the world. He made it possible for researchers to come to Timbuktu to turn it into the center of learning that the world took note of. So as we try now to make sure we begin to know more about ourselves, to begin to create trust amongst ourselves, to find ways of trading amongst ourselves, there can be no better name than Mansa. So that as we use the platform, we remember what he did. We remember what one man did. And then we tell ourselves, wherever we sit, in any corner of Africa, we can do even better. We should not think that our powers are constrained by anything. We must rise. We can be all we can be. And Mansa can help us do that. Thank you.
It's incredible building on that legacy, Mr. President. And I loved reading more in depth about the story. You know, and honestly, the new commodity on the continent is its people and is data and is the ability for us to connect. But you mentioned something really vital for me, and you spoke about the trust and the credibility and what we feel about each other. I'd like to ask you, Mr. Ayeyemi, you know, being a global banker, head of Citi in sub-Saharan Africa, you have extensive experience in operations and technology, transactional services. I'd like for you to speak on the trust issue, where that emanates from and how it plays into the banking space, and what gaps had you experienced in facilitating business deals that Mansa can help alleviate shortfalls that exist?
Thanks very much, Eleni. Can you hear me?
Perfectly, yes. Can I also ask all the audience members to not touch any buttons, please, because you're playing videos. Please, no one touch anything.
Okay, that's
great. Anyway, go ahead.
Yeah, that's great. And thanks to President Orama for putting this Mansa together, and thanks to all the panelists for also attending this. I think it's always important to stand on the shoulder of history to be able to see far, and it's also important to always listen to the African proverb that says, if you want to go fast, you go alone. If you want to go far, you go together. The challenge for Africa has always been we don't know who is behind the borders, and therefore it's been difficult for us to be able to connect. The second challenge is that people's behavior, because they are not observable, we always fear the worst when we are dealing with people. As a banker, it's always difficult to be able to say people in our countries are known and that they will behave well. Because they are unknown and we don't know how they will behave, we fear the worst. When you fear the worst, you price the worst. When you fear the worst, you avoid dealing with those countries. President Orama did say there are so many countries in Africa that actually do not have ability to make global payments because the global firms have the risks as far as they are concerned by moving away correspondent banking services from those African countries. I used to work for a global firm. I had the same fear. I had the same fear that all these countries, they are behind the iron curtain border of information and therefore difficult to be able to see them. Their players can behave in whatever way they like because there's nobody to connect. What Mansa will do is to make those things visible. The transaction search costs of being able to establish whether a company exists or doesn't exist will now become much smaller. It will become much smaller. And the method of enforcing good behavior by the business people, by the companies, will now become much smaller as well. And Mansa will then give incentive to companies to formalize. Because when we tell company, why don't you register your company and formalize your business and declare the true sales? And the business person says, so what do I get from that? You're still going to charge me very high interest rate. You're still going to make it difficult for me to be able to get access to finance. Those things will now reduce as people become easier to be seen. the light of information as is thrown to the performance and behavior of African companies, we'll be able to reduce the divergence in terms of pricing of finance, access to those finances, and access to business people as well. This is one way to transform Africa into one market where we can trade with ourselves. Until we're able to know who is behind the border, the idea of a continental-wide trade is going to continue to elude us. And I thank Afrexim for bringing this to fruition. But I also appeal to the rest of the African players, whether they are banks or any other institution. Information, being able to establish information about people is not basis of competition. It's an investment that we all make in hygiene factor today. And so much of money that we spend, a little bit of that contributed together, it put into a Mansa platform will enable us to be able to get better information, better verified information, and enable people to be able to deal with each other. Once we know that the person at the other side, it can be known and his behavior can be policed, then most likely we'll be able to get to a place where we can all trade together. If many of us as individuals are able to use mail order in those days, or even order on the internet in these days from the global world, because we know that there are people will perform when you send things to them. We need to get Africa to the stage where our people also know if I order from Mali and I'm based in Lagos, it will come because the person that is sending to me from Mali wants to be part of that global Africa-based behavior companies. Once we get there, then we can now talk about trillions and trillions of transactions that will be able to come through. Thank you, Eleni.
That's very exciting. I like the trillions and trillions of dollars worth of transactions, or Naira, or whatever the currency we choose to look at it in. Thank you very much, sir. That was really enlightening. Mr. Stefan Naletambi, really good that you're joining us. And you have been instrumental in making Finance Work for Africa partnership. You designed and launched the African Financial Market Initiative as well. You've been a big player and at the forefront of creating systems to make business easier, to bring down the barriers of doing business on the continent. You're now working, the AfDB has partnered with AfreximBank on Mansa. How does this new platform change the game?
Thank you, Eleni, and good morning, everybody. And thank you, President Orama, again, for inviting me to join you on this discussion. It'll definitely change the game, simply because we've been struggling, if I may put it that way, with the deficiency of financial infrastructure for so many years. We've been working with the credit bureaus, we've been working with all sorts of different things, and then on came the problem of compliance, which was an additional factor. And clearly through Mansa, we might be able to deal with not necessarily, I mean, of course, the compliance issue, but also other issues that may be linked to these other parts of the equation. So really, I'm very pleased that we've got to this point with Mansa. And definitely the FDB supports AfreximBank in this quest, and we will obviously be working closely. We are already working, as you mentioned, with AfreximBank to make sure that when we work on trade finance issues through Making Finance Work for Africa, we are showing the relevance of making sure that people do become more transparent in the way they work, and also do put their names on this registry. So we're obviously going to be encouraging the banks we work with, the SMEs and the big players, to make sure that they do participate in this work, because as always, it's going to make sure that we've got to be two to tango. So we've got to make sure that both the suppliers and the institutions that want to use this database play the game to make this relevant to all of us. Africa has been, up until recently, very much deprived of trade finance capabilities. President Orama mentioned we're now 20% of rejection levels. And in fact, our trade finance gap has even grown. And this was the research that was done by both the bank with AfreximBank. And it's actually grown from 70 to 80 billion just in the last 2 to 3 years. And we don't want to imagine how it is in 2020, because we know how difficult it's been for all of us to be more effective. And what we've been working on is more our portfolio. So really, I would like to say that this is a very welcome development, and the African Development Bank is supporting in all ways it can. Other issues we're working on with AfreximBank in the same vein is to help our issuing banks, our local indigenous banks, the smaller ones, to become more aware of the international standards and, of course, the compliance needs that they will have to face to be able to benefit from more financial flows from outside the continent or from within the continent from other bankers, obviously. And as we're saying, this is about intra-regional trade. And it's true, we've been looking too much overseas. We haven't been looking inwards to support each other. And this can be done much more than we are doing it at the moment. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. Dr. Nagla, I want to talk about the role of central banks in making MANSA a success. And of course, one of the interesting things, and I guess we've kind of alluded to it as well, is just the credibility, the verification of the information we're getting from companies, from businesses that we want to engage with. What is the role of central banks in MANSA? And tell me about what you can do to help verify the information that we're getting from companies that will be registering on the platform.
Thank you for inviting me, Mr. Rama, and thank you for having me here for the official launch of MANSA, which I think it is an main initiative to overcome critical challenges impact trade in Africa, included limited information. Central Bank believes in Africa and believes the importance of trade finance and facilitate trade finance to Africa will change the image of continent. That's why from the beginning and from the Central Bank signed a MOU with AfreximBank to begin to provide the training for African countries. We have made 5 rounds for training in our training arm, which is the Egyptian Banking Institute. We provide training for more than 132 African bankers,
yeah, no, it's carrying on.
representing more than 20 countries.
Yeah,
and we are.
I'll find out. I don't know.
Sorry, someone is on the call. It sounds like the tech team. I apologize, Dr. Nagla. Please continue. I apologize.
And because of the situation now, we are planning to launch the online training in English and French to provide our brothers, African brothers, all the training needed to use MANSA. And I think MANSA is very important for African countries because it is sort of matchmaking between African countries, or we can make it or say it on one-stop countries for SMEs, investment, banking facilities, banking information, provide a lot of information. For example, customer due diligence you have for something like this, you provide, every entity provide information about the entity itself, ownership and management, business information, compliance information, financial information. All this information create credibility for the entity that provides this information and make it easy for the other or the counterparty to facilitate the trade or the information between each other. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you so very much. And again, apologies. If everyone could just not click on anything on their screens, that would be fantastic so that we can do away with all the technical issues. I appreciate that. I'm checking in on Mr. Ahmed. Are you with us, sir? I know we've had a few issues to get you online. Mr. Ahmed? I think we've lost him, and he has sent a message saying that he was just battling with the connection. So hopefully we'll get him on later, but apologies for that. I would like to go back to President Orama, and what an incredible start to this conversation, and just seeing what everyone's role is going to be. You and I, President Orama, have been speaking about the African Continental Free Trade Agreement for a couple of years now. I want to talk about how MANSA could be a tool in ensuring the success of the Continental Free Trade Area, because in the lead up to what we're seeing now, where, all the countries, we've seen a buy-in from everyone, many CEOs that I've been speaking to saying, we're ready to expand further into the continent. We want to engage with other businesses, but the big question is, how will they do it? Is MANSA going to be the solution? And if you could just play out some of the practicalities where, as soon as the Continental Free Trade Area goes live, how MANSA could come in and assist.
Yeah, thank you very much, Eleni, again. And let me also thank my colleagues who have commented, who brought several insights on what MANSA can do. But let me go deeper into what can do to support the African Continental Free Trade Agreement implementation. You see, there are so many constraints to intra-African trade and intra-African investments. We have to tackle them one by one. I think we have to start with the low-hanging fruits. There is, a conventional wisdom. People say all the time that the greatest constraint to intra-African trade is deficit of infrastructure. There's no doubt that that is a huge constraint. But the way we see that in AfreximBank is that the infrastructure gap problem is a generalized problem. It's a constraint to African trade overall, not necessarily intra-African trade. Because today, total African trade is about $1 trillion, plus or minus some percentage, depending on the year and commodity prices. The problem is that out of the $1 billion, intra-African trade share is about $150 to $170 billion. Why is it not $400 billion? Why is it not $500 billion? The available infrastructure is able to carry $1 trillion of trade. Why is intra-African trade share on that same infrastructure why has it not become 300, 400? We believe the key constraint to that is information. People do not know what lies across the border. I think Ade brought it out graphically. What you don't know is a risk. If you don't know about somebody, you think the person is so risky, it's going to kill you. But we don't know anything about what is happening across the border. That is why, in a study we did recently, Ethiopia was importing certain kinds of leather from outside Africa at a much higher cost than Burundi was exporting the same type of leather. And Burundi was just not too far from Ethiopia. And I can give you several examples of the absurdity. Côte d'Ivoire exports high quality certain kinds of rubber products that Nigeria imports from Malaysia at a much higher cost. So you see, there's no information. So one thing that the MANSA platform will do is to begin to resolve that information problem. Unless we begin to know what is happening, what is going on in our different countries, we begin to know more about our potential partners, we will not feel comfortable dealing with them. we will continue to deal with others. And then we will continue to export commodities, because dealing with others is exporting commodities. Whereas if we start dealing with ourselves, we will start exporting some value-added products.
Exactly.
The direct and indirect consequences of what we are doing today is huge. The second thing it will do, you see, one of the problems we have in terms of promoting intra-African trade is access to finance, access to trade finance. I mentioned to you about what is happening globally in terms of rejections. International banks are rejecting trade finance applications from Africa. And even the number of African institutions that are participating in trade finance. The study we just concluded with the African Development Bank and UN Economic Commission for Africa will show that more than $100 billion is required, and nobody is able to meet this gap in terms of trade finance needs in the continent. But access to trade finance can only come if the banks are able to reduce significantly the compliance cost of providing trade finance to African entities. If the compliance cost is high, many African entities, many African countries will continue to be rationed off. And the greatest challenge in terms of access to trade finance is in the access to intra-African trade finance. Because in addition to the issue of compliance, there's also an additional problem of country risk information people don't have about other countries. Those outside Africa understand African country risk more than African institutions, African banks do. So African banks would rather accept a letter of credit opened in Africa, but confirmed by a bank outside Africa before they themselves then accept it. We've had situations where we've had to come in, even where it is completely unnecessary. We had a situation where a supplier in South Africa was hesitating in those days to accept an LC opened by the Central Bank of Nigeria because they didn't know. We had to step in. At the time I was telling you this, it was, as far as we're concerned, it was a free gift of fees. But that is exactly what is going on. And so what MANSA is going to do is to be able to begin to provide this information. People begin to know the people that are dealing with people, the people behind the names, the businesses, and then that will begin to increase access to trade information, to trade finance. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Mr. President, and so interesting and enlightening, and just sharing some of those experiences with us. So thank you, Mr. Yemi. I want you to jump in here because it sounds like, you know, a compliance costs, in a sense, choking deals. It makes the cost of business more expensive. If you're taking on risk that you don't know, then you obviously want a much higher reward and return. So just, I mean, you look at the whole value chain of things, and this was inevitable. But I'm curious, are you worried about companies not being able to meet the requirements for CDD and KYC? Do we have enough companies that can be compliant? Do we have enough bankable projects? Are you worried about that?
Thank you, Eleni. Normally, I don't disagree with President Orama, so for the first time, I'm going to disagree with him today. He said dealing with others is exporting commodities. Others is exporting jobs and importing poverty. So, I mean, that's the only thing I would say is not disagreement, really, but it's just making sure we bring that fact home. Yes, you're right regarding the question of can we deal with, is the compliance cost very high? Yes, it is very high because all our countries are rated as high risk. And when we need to do any trade finance, any letters of credit, the country that is going to is looked at as a very high risk, and the compliance cost for any bank is pretty high, and any correspondent bank that wants to deal with us is ready to price that at a very high rate, and then we'll pass that on to our various customers. The transaction cost of dealing in Africa is extremely prohibitive. But one of the things that I also invite the governments of Africa to see in the implementation of MANSA is that the fact that all the companies will now be able to pass the truth test of looking at being able to declare how much they are actually trading. Most people today understate their sales value because they don't want to pay tax, because they don't see the benefit of formalization. Knowing that if you are on MANSA and you put the right information there, it will create benefits for you in terms of access to finance, in terms of reducing the cost, is something that we encourage more people to be able to actually declare their financials in a very truthful way, enable more government to get more tax revenues, and enable our economy to be able to grow ultimately. So that when people from outside actually look at our former data as a means of measuring the size of productivity of our various economies, they will see it is much bigger than what our former data historically has been showing. That's why most times when we say, oh, the country is small in terms of former information, then we say, okay, the informal trade is making it to be bigger. Being able to formalize the convergence between the former and the informal, making sure that we actually know the right size of economic activities in our countries will ensure that we can now attract financing at a much cheaper rate. It is strange.
How much?
Just a second. It is strange that price of money in some countries in the world is negative, and such money is not available to African countries, African companies, even when they are ready to pay exorbitant rate. Yes, Ellen, you want to ask me a question?
Yeah, so I wanted to say, what percentage cheaper can we actually get now with the MANSA platform? When we say it's going to drop the cost of business and de-risk, what percentage savings are we talking about here?
So if you look at our transactions today, whether it's interest rate, whether it is fees and all that, we are in the range today in dollar terms of 10%. We are in the range today where if you are in the German economy, you lend to German government for 30 years, you pay a price for lending to them. So anything between 500 basis points, which is 50%, is something that we can ultimately look for as a price of getting good information across our continent. If we get that good information, we can halve the price of transacting if we get the right information. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. Mr. Naletambi, I want to talk about money laundering and illicit flows out of the continent. Do you think that MANSA can eliminate those issues that are crippling us? We have so much money flowing out. How can MANSA assist in ensuring that there's more transparency in the way we do business, and that companies won't take advantage of the lack of compliance and lack of standardization of policy?
You bring up a very important point, Eleni, and actually, I think eliminate might be a strong word that you chose, but of course it'll definitely contribute to reducing the illicit financial flows. I'm sure you remember the Mbeki high-level panel, I think back in 2015, said that there's about 60 billion per year annually that Africa is losing of illicit financial flows. Well, of course, it's all linked to, part of it is linked to the lack of transparency that we have on the continent. And this was CEO Ayeyemi was alluding to that, the need for better governance and obviously the tracking and the transparency of what we're doing. Now, of course, it's a digital platform we're talking about, right? So digitization by definition will support to a certain extent formalization. It's up to us to see how we leverage that. At the bank, we've been championing for many years now. We actually have a policy on preventing illicit financial flows, and we're supporting several governments, mainly in the low-income countries, to actually put together their anti-corruption and anti-money laundering units, strengthen them in the government to help support the reduction of illicit financial flows. It's an uphill struggle. Let's call it what it is. But at the end of the day, it is, to a certain extent, through digitization, it's going to help us actually make a quantum leap in terms of enabling people see the value of being now formalized. Now, the issue then is how can, so MANSA definitely will contribute to this reduction in illicit financial flows, but we've got to make sure also at our level of discussion with governments that we also bring to the attention of these chambers of commerce, of these business partners, that it's their value, there's value for them in signing up in MANSA, to informing MANSA of what they're doing, providing the information so that they realize that there is possibilities for them to actually access cheaper and better money and faster. Because of course, the fact that there's this platform will allow us also to be able to access the information much faster. And you know, this issue about ultimate business owners is a huge issue in the compliance space, because we have these, you know, these, let's say, mazes of different holdings. Sometimes it's hide the beneficial owner, who at the end is the one. I deal with it regularly when I'm lending on the continent, when I have to go through my compliance discussions with our people in the bank and it's, you know, it's not easy. And we sometimes spend weeks and weeks and weeks going through this process. So clearly MANSA has a lot of space to deal in. We at the bank will definitely be supporting AfreximBank, not only at the company level, but also at the government level, in making sure that people understand the value of actually starting to work much more effectively in providing this information. Even if it doesn't pay off in the first year, it will pay off. And as President Orama was saying, we've got to look to an Africa that's much more value add in terms of production. And in fact, the intra-Africa trade might help us also reach that goal. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Dr. Nagla, I want to talk about we spoke a little bit about the role of central banks earlier. Being in Egypt and speaking to so many Egyptian companies, a lot agree that they haven't really focused on countries south of Egypt, and now it's becoming more and more important, specifically with the Continental Free Trade Agreement. What do you hope to do as a central bank, one of the very few central banks actually that have signed up to MANSA, in terms of setting the example of, you know, an institution such as a central bank signing up to this platform, and how other central banks can leverage the benefits of MANSA, specifically then assisting companies operating in Egypt to want to go and expand further without worrying about risk and compliance and all the other things that really matter when you're spending money in another territory. Dr. Nagla, are you there? Okay, I'm not sure if she can hear me. I'm going to go, President Orama, are you standing by for me? Are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay. I've got a question for you. We can hopefully get Dr. Nagla back online. But President Orama, I love numbers, as you know, and I want to talk about some of them that I got from the AfreximBank research page. And it says that MANSA can help improve intra-African trade from the current 15% to about 38%. But how do we get it to 60%? Like our counterparts in Asia? What is it going to take for us to get to that level? Because I can tell you now, just from some of the conversations I'm having with people on the ground, African businesses want to collaborate. They're just waiting for the moment for it to be an easier process.
Look, let me tell you that it may look so far-fetched, given where we are today, but we believe it's achievable over a reasonable period of time. Let's start with formalizing the informal sector. There are several studies that have been done. We have started doing ours, more detailed, working with the UNECA to do actual studies at the corridors. It's not yet done. We've just done one. We are going to do more so they get the entire data estimates. But the estimates we have today is about $40 to $60 billion of informal trade taking place. Imagine if you just formalize, let's assume you formalize 60% of that. You're talking about maybe 36 or $40 billion of additional intra-African trade you can bring on. What does that do to you? If you add it to your 170 or so, it takes you to 200 and something billion, $210 billion.
Wow.
Then look at what is going on today with light manufacturers. Africa imports about $60 billion of light manufacturers. If you're able to use MANSA to encourage the SMEs to participate in supply chains, to encourage our people to buy what we produce within the continent, we probably can take a significant market share from that. So that alone can also add another 20 to 30 billion dollars of what is possible, possibly additional intra-African trade. These are low-hanging fruits and can happen in just a few years, because these are trade that already exists. So it's not something that you need to go and create. Of course, beyond that, what MANSA can then do is improve access to finance. Finance is key to any development we want to pursue. The greatest problem we have in the continent today is that we do not have a way of providing the right financing to our people. Many of our people that need to do business can't get access to finance. So if you're able to deal with this, that will then, in the second round, accelerate what I've just told you. So I really don't, I think in a matter of 20 or even 15 to 20 years, if we continue to implement the AfCFTA, if we do all these things we are trying to do, plus other complementary things we are doing, work together as a continent, all our institutions, all our political leaders, I don't think it's far-fetched to think that in 15 to 20 years, we will have intra-African trade being 60% of Africa's total trade. Thank you.
President Orama, Mansa Musa is listening to your dreams, and I think that they're doable. I mean, look, President Orama, you mentioned something interesting on the informal sector, and it's something that's really close to my heart because we actually underestimate how important the informal sector is. So here's my question. Is MANSA now for small to large companies, does it cut across the entire spectrum of businesses? And I don't want us to exclude the smaller guys. How are you going to try and lure them in to say, look, this is why you need to be compliant? Because as you say, if you're a small producer of leather in Burundi, you still have a market somewhere in Kenya, for example, or wherever. How do we get the smaller players on board?
No, the smaller players, actually, they need this more than any other group. And today, what we have, don't forget, we've already onboarded a number of entities into it. And I think if you look at it in terms of percentage, of course, financial institutions are the largest, followed by actually SMEs are becoming increasingly important. Because in terms of who we have onboarded and who we are targeting to onboard even further, they need it because that is the only way they can participate in the intra-regional supply chains. They are the people who are most affected by all the problems we've been describing. Lack of trust, not being able to operate in a way that is transparent, and so on and so forth. So Mansa would help them overcome these problems. Mansa will help them immediately know what the global standards, what is expected of them. It sets the standard, and then those of them who are able to be there will benefit. And let me tell you something that is also going on. We've also finished, and we'll be launching in a few weeks, the Pan-African Payment and Settlement System. We've done the Pan-African Payment and Settlement System with the African Central Banks in such a way that for you to participate, you have to have a Mansa ID. So the small and medium enterprises who will need this to make it possible for a creative producer, a small creative producer, say in Nigeria, who is doing Nollywood, to be able to sell his or her products to a buyer, a small farmer in Zambia. That small company producing those small films in Nigeria must have a Mansa ID. That means it must be onboarded so that the person buying from Zambia can trust the transaction he or she is getting into. So it is critical because that payment platform, which we hope, working with all the other financial institutions in Africa, the central banks, will help drive intra-African trade, will be integrated with Mansa. So that is important for the SMEs because that's the only way they can trade all across Africa as if they are trading domestically.
Okay, I want to go into some of the practicalities. Mr. Nalatambi, as we say, that you've launched other initiatives within the financial framework on the continent. And one thing that we keep reminding ourselves on is that we have vastly different countries across the continent, different policies, different regulatory frameworks. So is this going to be a standardization of what is required? And if we don't get the sign up of all countries, does that then bring into question the viability and whether it can be a success on the continent?
So is that to me or to Nalatambi?
Mr. Nalatambi. I'm so sorry about all the technical. Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. Nalatambi, are you there?
Yes, sir. Yes, can you hear me? Yeah,
yes.
Okay, so as Professor Arama was saying, President Arama was telling us, there is going to be the link with the PAPs, the payment systems, the African payment systems for Mansa to be valued. Is that the fact that the firms will have to actually be registered in Mansa to be able to benefit from this FX facility, the payment facility through the African payment systems. So in fact, what does it mean? Yes, there's going to be a need to have the governments on board. And of course, and I'd be honest with you, I think it's more about the chambers of commerce. It's about the financial system. You have the central banks that'll be at one side of the curve, of the spectrum. You also have, of course, the SMEs and to see the benefit that they can get out of it. Part of it will be because they want to do trade and they want to leverage PAPs to cheapen the cost of their trading. That will mean that they'll have to sign up through Mansa. But alongside that, we should make sure that the governments through AfCFTA are aware of the value of making sure that their SMEs do sign into this Mansa platform to be able to therefore benefit from becoming more, let's say, well known across the continent for people to be able to support them financially. So I would say there will be, as I mentioned earlier on, there will be work in parallel at several levels, be it with the government officials, then with the chambers of commerce, with the different industry, professional bodies, associations, and of course the bankers, to make sure that we do make sure that Mansa becomes the one-stop shop that it wants to be for financial information on African SMEs.
But to be able to do that, you need a high number of businesses that want to register, and you're very correct in saying, exactly, I mean, the associations, it's a pity that Mr. Mansour isn't with us because he represents manufacturers, Pan-African Manufacturers Association and the Nigerian Manufacturers Association. And it's those critical bodies that will get the message through to the businesses to then want to register and comply.
Fully agreed. Fully agreed. So of course it's going to be, it's another value chain. It's a value chain of information that we're going to be sharing at our different levels. We'll make sure that we can do what we can for Mansa to be known and to be activated, to be relevant to these different professional bodies. But it also, we should make sure that we should be also focusing on the value chains that we know can benefit from intra-Africa trade, even at this point. And there are some value chains that we know, supply chains or even production chains and medical chains, supply chains that can benefit from it. So we should be focusing on those. And that's, of course, a discussion as well, where you're rightly mentioned, has to be taken at a very high level, both at the government level, to see what is the leverage, what is the most relevant for certain countries, in which other countries should they be working with, which other industries, where they can find support for themselves to be able to produce more effectively and cheaply without having to go outside the continent, and leveraging African knowledge and production capacity.
Thank you very much for that. Mr. Ayeyemi, there's so much here that banks will be involved with. And, you know, President Orama was talking about the Mansa ID. Do you think that it's going to become, you know, a staple when doing business or going to a bank and saying, look, I want financing, this is what I want to do, and here's my Mansa card, and this is the updated information, and this is my credible information on the platform? Is it going to be trusted, and what will it take to ensure that trust, because we spoke about it earlier, exists?
Thank you. I think once the information is credible, and for the credibility of the information, we need all the countries to participate. We need all the governments in the countries to see that this is a way for us to improve information and trust across our continent. Once that becomes viable, and I'm sure it will be, all of us need to make sure it becomes viable, then it becomes easier for banks to be able to onboard clients. It becomes easier for banks to be able to look at clients and say, yeah, this is a viable client for the purpose of being financed. And once that Mansa ID becomes the currency with which will company or not, it makes it easier for banks to be able to onboard, for the banks to be able to lend, because a large component of the cost of transacting today, both for the bank, being able to give loan, being able to open an account, being able to monitor the loan, will also become reduced as we now use this social infrastructure for the purpose of being able to do various financing. So a short answer to your question is yes, it will become much more useful because we can now rely on it, because it's being policed by other people. It becomes much more viable because all the countries need to participate in this, because it's in the best interest of the countries to also participate, because formalization has to have a benefit. And the benefit of formalization is access to finance, is access to cheaper finance, is access to market. And once we get all of those things known and true, then all our people will be able to get those benefits. And our countries and government should push behind this, because we cannot be going in 55 different ways and expect to reach one destination. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think we've got Dr. Naglale back. Are you back? Can you hear me? Oh, hi, I miss being on a stage with my guests. Dr. Nagla? Unfortunately not. Okay. President Orama, it's back to you. And you snuck in a really important announcement and something that we've spoken about before on an FX platform where businesses are going to be able to transact with African currencies, not requiring to first, bypass the dollar and euro, or go through the dollar and euro, but be able to bypass it. Tell me what the thinking is, because here you've got the Mansa platform that's focusing on compliance and information and current country information and business information, but you're going to take it one step further, which is very exciting. Tell me about the thinking there.
Yes, thank you very much. I want to add to some of the things you had said, then if you allow me, and then I go to perhaps. I did mention the issue of making sure that we take this as a whole of Africa approach. And I think the African Union has recognized that, and we believe that MANSA is going to be adopted as such, as the platform for the continent. We've also recognized that it is important that it's done by everybody. So what we're doing is actually, the cost of developing this, we've done it, but we plan to donate it so that it will be owned as a cooperative. So all African financial institutions will become part of it. So collectively, subject to the what will be agreed amongst all the members, we'll use this cooperative platform to make sure that it works in a way that supports banking and financing within the continent. We believe this would expand the entities that will be onboarded so that as many SMEs and other companies that we have in the continent can get onboarded, and also in a manner that is standardized, so that when we then have this MANSA ID, anybody who has a MANSA ID, it is it's understood by any banker anywhere in Africa what that means, because everybody is a part of this process. Now, the Pan-African Payment and Settlement System is another critical digital payment platform that is needed for the continent. Why? There are all sorts of problems, of course, payment in Africa. Most of the payments that goes from one African country to the other, today, they pass through a third country. We've estimated that Africa loses about $5 billion in charges paid out just to make payment that will end up somewhere else in Africa. We think this is not acceptable, and we must do something about it. And we know that a whole lot of trade that would have happened intra-regionally is being diverted because of currency issues. So intra-African trade is held back by also currency problems. So we said we want to domesticate. I don't want to say domesticate in the context of Africa as one entity. We want to do as much as possible to domesticate the payment for intra-regional trade within Africa. So the Pan-African Payment and Settlement System will make it possible for somebody in Angola to pay for a good from Egypt in Angolan kwacha. The Egyptian gets Egyptian pounds. That we also believe that this will go a long way to encourage other things. Today, many airlines operating within Africa are constrained because their money, their funds are tied up in countries because of exchange. We believe this will begin to reduce. We also believe that working with the Association of, I think, Stock Exchange, Association of African Stock Exchanges, we are going to be able to increase and improve liquidity in many of the stock exchanges. If somewhere down the road, we are then able to make it possible for people to, people say in says Cote d'Ivoire, to participate in the Nairobi Stock Exchange by just paying for it in a CFA franc for the shares they are buying in the Nairobi Stock Exchange. That way the volume and the liquidity in the Stock Exchange of Nairobi, for example, will increase. So we believe that the payment platform is another way, another way of improving interregional investments, interregional trade, and the relationship amongst all African countries. But we have to bring other things that will make it easy to work, and the Pan-African Payment and Settlement System is one of them. Banks, part of the arrangement we have for this, we have a group of institutions that we call the verifiers, and these include central banks of the African countries. The Central Bank of Egypt, as Dr. Nagla has said, has played even a more commendable role. They've invested heavily in training other central banks, many commercial banks, about Mansa and how to participate in Mansa. And as we heard from Dr. Nagla earlier, they're also offering to continue to expand this training so that all of us can leverage this to support the business within the continent and support trade within the continent. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you. I'm going to go to Dr. Nagla. Are you there? It takes a few seconds when you unmute yourself to actually hear you. Are you there, Dr. Nagla? It's such a pity. Okay, I'm going to get my team to carry on working with you to get you back online. I'm going to go now to Mr. Ayeyemi. And, there was an interesting conversation on the notion of getting the informal sector plugged in to Mansa. And I guess the banks don't really, get direct exposure to the informal sector. You guys work with established businesses. How will it help propel the informal sector if they are formalized? And what would that mean from a banking perspective for you? And there was a question that came through in the Q&A that also spoke about getting them plugged into revenue services and paying tax, or at least knowing that these businesses exist, right? Because we just don't even know the extent of the business market.
Thank you. From a bank point of view, every person that is an economic agent, either trading or buying and selling, is a potential customer. To the extent that that potential customer formalizes and can easily participate in the payment, in the financing system, then the banks will be able to actually allocate finance to that company and to that individual and to that small and medium scale enterprises. So the access to finance is a critical component of the positives that companies can get when they become formalized. In itself, yes, it has cost for companies. It allowed them to be visible to their country tax authorities and therefore pay tax. But it also becomes easier for them to have, both from a size point of view, from a price point of view, access to financing. And they also then become able to have access to market, because other people can then see, that there is companies in Aba, in Nairobi and co that are manufacturing bags and shoes. But then also there are people in Kano, in Burundi, that are manufacturing, that are preparing leather. And for each of these that we can connect between our various countries is keeping jobs, is expanding jobs and expanding prosperity within the continent. So if you talk to every banker today, ability to get the right size of loan is the challenge they are facing. And if you talk to every business person today, ability to get access to the loan is the problem they're having. So the difference between the banks wants to create loan and the business people wants to get loan is that we don't have information about each other. Once this information becomes a more prosperous environment. Thank you.
Thank you very much. President Orama, I've got a question for you from your Executive Vice President at Afrexim Bank. Mr. George Elambi is listening in and sent us this question. How would Mansa help small to medium-sized enterprises, specifically within the manufacturing business sector?
Thank you very much. Well, what we want to do is to make sure we create regional supply chains. We want to make sure that the SMEs participate in value-add activities that we hope will drive development in the continent. There are a number of products that are being put in place to make sure that happens, being done by us, being done by others. Supply chain finance and other forms of finance being put in place. However, there is a challenge. If the SMEs not operate in a transparent manner, first, they will not be able to be connected to the larger corporates under the supply chain model we are talking about. They will not be able to operate across borders, supply things even across their current borders. They will not be able to access credit because the banks will continue to be worried. The big corporates that need the things they can manufacture will also hesitate to give them orders to supply. In the context of intra-African trade, there is initiative we are also pursuing because we believe that one of the reasons we have so huge an amount of informal trade going on, informal intra-African trade going on in Africa is institutional failure. We do not have export trading companies, as you have in Asia, for example, who are able to manage exporting risks. We do not have them play the role such companies play. But to have successful export trading companies, you also have to have vibrant SME sector. To have a vibrant SME sector, we need to find a way to formalize the SME activities. And that is why MANSA is critical. If we don't create this and commoditize it, because one challenge, I think Natembi mentioned it and Ade also did, what problem you have is if everybody has to do one by one every time to understand every country, to understand every entity, to understand every sector, the cost becomes exorbitant, too much for any company to do. But what MANSA will do is reduce the cost of search, commoditize this information. So somebody just goes there and gets the information he or she wants, and then engages. So we believe that is MANSA will be critical in fostering supply chains in the continent. And we should look forward to that happening once it takes full root. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Mr. President. I'm going to go through one last round of questions. Mr. Naletambi, if you could just jump in here, and the President was alluding to the fact that some businesses aren't compliant and they need to clean up, right? So how much of a problem are we going to have in getting companies to comply to KYC and CDD? What is going to be required? And I wonder, and I guess the answer is going to be yes. Is this going to elevate our game in terms of the way we do business? But is it going to make it more expensive to do business for the companies that perhaps weren't 100% compliant? Is compliance an expensive exercise? And I'm not talking about the paperwork and handing those in. I'm talking about the journey to becoming compliant.
Thank you, Lenny. That's the billion-dollar question. No, what's interesting is the risk. It's the risk reward, really. And what I think is behind all of this, it's all about sending a very strong signal that Africa means business, that Africa wants to make sure that we have the right tools in place for business to be executed. And I think this is a fundamental message that they're sending. Alongside the Africa Free Trade Agreement, one has to realize that there's so much nuts and bolts that have to be put in place for this to really be effectively performing in the next 5 to 10 years. It's going to take some time, not the MANSA in particular, but the overall free trade agreement implementation. So the point is one has to be working on these different fronts in parallel. And clearly compliance is one of the main problems that we've had. It's actually made it us even more isolated, if I may say, on the world scene. But at the same time, we haven't exploited our internal scene. So this is what also Mansa is looking to help us address, to say, by the way, it may not necessarily mean that because you're cut off from everyone outside, that if we didn't have the right systems internally, we could also be able to work more effectively together and realize we could be more efficient. And Dr. Ram alluded to it several times on examples that he provided. But there's still a lot of work to do. And I'd say that we should just make sure that we send this message from all angles and make sure that people understand that it's value to all of them. To link up with the informal conversation that you were mentioning, one thing I think we mustn't forget, think about what Kenya has achieved through digitization of payments. It's not banking, but digitization of payments has created a huge amount of relevance of artificial intelligence for these small loans that are now provided through the banking system. If you look at the deposits now in some of the Kenyan banks, they've more than doubled or tripled thanks to these small small depositors that are people that just basically have a bank account in their phone, and it's all linked to the model of banking plus MNOs working together. I encourage, of course, all our bankers to do more of this type of work, because this is the way to help formalize the informal, and despite them being informal. And one thing that you must know, which I found very interesting, is there was a study done in Kenya on when are the loans asked in the phone, when are the loans the most demanded, requested? It's between 3 and 4 a.m., which people were surprised at. And it's not about people, yes, but it's not about people going to paying for drinks. It's about the suppliers, the wholesalers, people buying to go to sell to the markets. Those are the people that ask these small loans. That's when the demand is the highest every day. And so this is the point. There's a huge amount of market that can be created that is still begging to be done. And this can also be linked to Mansa. We have to think about how it could be linked to it. Of course, it's smaller SMEs, but these smaller SMEs, they started from MSMEs, now they've become SMEs, and they might become MEs as time goes by. So the point is they should be also part of this discussion. Thank you.
That was incredible. Thank you so very much for those insights. Mr. Ayemi, I want you to, I've been looking at some of the questions that are coming through from the audience, and a lot of questions on how much is it going to cost, what are the practicalities and so forth. And I, of course, encourage you to get in touch with Afrixim Bank so that they can give you that information in detail. But I actually want, as we wrap up, Mr. Ayemi, I want you to speak to our audience about why this platform makes sense from a monetary perspective, even though we know those numbers will come through once you inquire, and kind of put it into perspective for us, that if you're trying to go the compliance route and that you're looking for financing and you're looking to tap into a bank, that is a costly exercise in itself. And therefore, you need to look at a platform that is going to help all businesses and put everyone on the same playing field. And of course, we're wrapping up now. So any last thoughts you might have, you're welcome to share those.
Thank you very much. I think the way I would like to position this for our various audience is in the question now during the COVID period, where unfortunately I've lost a lot of people. But avoidance of being infected, taking the right actions, and hopefully in the future, when the vaccine becomes available, getting vaccinated, though it has cost to us, but ultimately it makes us healthier and avoid the cost of getting infected and becoming sick. The same way, every company that is able to throw the searchlight to itself and be able to showcase that it is going to be part of a larger pool of companies, being a member of a platform that will ensure that it becomes compliant, is going to be able to have access to market and be able to have access to finance. As a banker, if somebody is a member of a platform, I know that the platform will ensure that person actually does the right behavior going forward. The risk attributes of that company is going to be much lower than the risk attribute of a company that is unknown is not a member of a platform. Ultimately, if we look at why are we talking about all of this, it's because from a demonstration effect point of view, the counterparts in Asia, the counterparts in Europe have been able to do better. If those counterparts in Asia and Europe have been able to do better because they've been able to register and formalize their businesses, then it's something that we should aspire to and we should try and be able to do. If we are not known, again, I talk to various ministers of finance and say, listen, Ade, are you ready to lend money to my people? And I tell the ministers, if you don't know them, it is difficult for me to bank them. The same way for all the small and medium-scale enterprises, if they are unknown, they are difficult to be banked. Becoming known, becoming registered, becoming ID is a critical step that needs to be taken to becoming formalized. If you become formalized, you get access to better, not only financing, but also access to various markets that is able to buy your goods and services. Ultimately, if you look at the various stock exchanges that we have today, that is one way of becoming formalized for those companies. And they are financed not only from banks, but also from the capital market. If our small and medium-scale enterprises and our big companies can become formalized, they will be able to have access to finance, but also access to bigger markets, and the search costs become reduced significantly. Today, the search cost is prohibitive, and that search cost ultimately reduces the access to finance that for these companies. And if we can eliminate that across the continent. And finally, the belief that people that can pay and won't pay is a critical cost in pricing loans to people, to our markets today. And if that goes away because you are a member of a platform, you don't want to misbehave, then the bankers can actually reduce the cost to borrowing and expand the cost, the allocation of finance, of capital to all these companies, because it's a bigger problem for the banking system. And if that gets solved, then we'll be able to see a much more company that will be thriving in the continent. Thank you.
Very encouraging and very exciting. President Orama, I want to talk about your dreams, how you plan to gain traction on Mansa, what we need to see from the governments, from the institutions. Some people are listening in today. What is your message, and how do we get things on the go and create the momentum that we need?
Thank you very much, Eleni, again. And let me also repeat my thanks to our colleagues who have joined us today. I mean, especially the panelists, and then, of course, others who are listening in and who are sending in questions. I think Ade summarized extent the benefits of this all across, to those who are contributing, to the countries concerned, to the financial system, and to the continent at large. I'll just further summarize it by saying all of us in the continent, I think today, if you ask anybody in the continent, the development priorities are industrializing the continent, promoting intra-regional trade, through the AfCFTA. Mansa is a cross-cutting initiative that will help achieve all that. And it's a low-hanging fruit. In terms of the magnitude of the things that we need to do, the investments we need to make to begin to achieve our goals as set out under Agenda 2063, the Africa we want, Mansa is one prerequisite. You see, you have to sequence how you move along that chain as you go towards achieving industrialization, as you go towards ensuring that we trade seamlessly amongst ourselves. So in that sequencing, Mansa is among the things in the first step. If we don't trust ourselves, we have not broken the barriers colonialism foisted on us about 100 years or so ago, more than 100 years ago. So we have to use this to bring down the borders as quickly as possible. And by bringing down the borders, we are going to begin to trade more with ourselves. We are going to begin to see industrialization happen in the continent. So I must thank also the African Union Commission for understanding this and taking up this Mansa. And we hope that at the summit level that a decision will be made so that every country will recognize Mansa as the platform for the continent because of the benefits of that system so eloquently identified by my colleagues today in the panel. And going forward, as I said earlier, we are looking to involve everybody. We thank all those who have already onboarded. We are well on the way to onboarding almost half of the banks, indicated banks in the continent, and of course expanding the onboarding to the corporates and the SMEs. It's still low in number, but high impact, given the kind of institutions that have onboarded. But we need to have so many. We have thousands of companies in the continent. So we need to have many going, and we need to have this IDC. So that's why I take this opportunity to invite all the financial institutions, the organized private sector, who will be approaching as we try to put in place this cooperative framework. We see this as our contribution to the continent, so we will donate this to the cooperative to build. And then all of us together, we will do our best to make sure we populate this so that it achieves the goal, because the problem we all are describing is a public health problem in the financial system and in terms of the development arena, in terms of dealing with the development challenges of the continent. It's a public health problem, lack of information. So because it's a public health problem, we have to take a public health approach. All of us have to comply with the way we want to comply. Because when all of us do, each and every one of us participating in that ecosystem, in the business, in finance and everything, beneficiaries. That is where we see it, and that is how we hope the banks, the governments, the central banks, and everybody will see it. Please let me take this opportunity to thank all the central banks that are supporting actually strongly, as some of them confirmed to be the verifiers for all the data coming from their countries. And of course, I mentioned the support we are getting, especially from the Central Bank of Egypt in terms of training. We encourage all those who have not been trained and who need it to participate, to get trained, because it is a new system, and it's by training that we get people comfortable in using it. So that's what I have to say now, and hope that we move from here to ramping up activities under the platform. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, President Orama, and thank you to all the attendees. I asked how many people are on board, and this is encouraging. There's 758 people watching today, President Orama. So there's definite interest. We've got so many questions about the practicalities, and Afrixim will help answer all those questions for you as we move forward. But it's encouraging, President Orama, and to the Afrixim Bank team as well. I mean, as a journalist operating on the continent, when you say we've got an information deficit, it's so hard because we're trying to find interesting stories across the continent, and sometimes you really have to dig very deep. So I'm hoping that this platform can give information to all those who require it, because there's excellence that is on this continent. We just don't know about each other. So I thank you very much. I thank you to the audience and, of course, our panelists today as well. I apologize profusely for all the technical difficulties, but hopefully as time goes on, we go back to a new normal, and I'll see you in person. So Des, it's over to you, and thank you very much for having me on today. This like 3-second delay is a lot of fun, I have to say. You guys are probably having a good laugh at us. Des, are you there?
Yes, I'm absolutely here. Can you hear me?
This has been interesting. Yes, I can. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, thank you so much for doing a fantastic job too for anchoring this panel. I mean, so much information that was shared. So many comments and WhatsApp messages are coming in on the very, very wonderful discussion and information that people are getting right now. So thank you again for absolutely doing a great job in spurring on this conversation today. And thanks again to all our panelists, Professor Rama, Mr. Ayemi, Mr. Nalatambi, Dr. Nagla, and Engineer Mansour, though we had some technical issues with him as well, but we thank them all for being a part of the event today. Thank you again for sharing all the information. I mean, so many people are asking, okay, what about Mansa? And I guess every question you could possibly have might have been answered on this call because there's so many nuggets were shared today. How it can help improve traffic and trade, improve access to finance, make it easy for banks to onboard and lend. But I know there's some people that still ask how many questions now. How can I sign up? How do I do this? How can I be a part of this? We hear your questions and we have the answer to that question right now. So we're going to run a video that will tell you exactly how you can onboard and be a part of the Mansa repository platform. Tina, go ahead, please.
Welcome to this simple video guide designed to help your organizations create and complete your customer due diligence profile on the Mansa platform. The single source of primary data required needed to perform CDD checks on counterparties in Africa. If you're using the Mansa platform for the first time, you'll need to start by entering www.mansaafrica.com into your browser. This will bring you to the homepage, which looks like this. Click to choose the English or French language option. From here, you can navigate all general contents immediately, including learning more about Mansa, about customer due diligence, and investing in Africa. You can also access the latest related news and events, along with Mansa contact details. Now let's show you how to register on the Mansa platform as a contributor. Start by clicking on Register/Login at the top right-hand side of the page. Click on Register as Contributor. Add the details of your administrator. This is the person who will administer your organization's profile on the Mansa platform. They will be able to create their organization's makers and checkers, as well as upload the company profile. They will also be able to manage those users and profile accordingly. Then click Create Account. An email notification will be sent to the administrator's registered email address, including a link to activate their account. Once this is done, the system will invite the user to click here to continue to register as a contributor. Next, fill in the form in 3 simple steps. Step 1. Enter your organization's details. Step 2. Enter your administrator details. Step 3. Check the details summary carefully. If you need to change anything, you can click on either of the edit buttons indicated. Then click on Submit for authorization. Your contributor profile will be sent to Mansa for approval, and when approved, a notification will appear that looks like this. This will also be sent via email. As the administrator, you can now create other users that will be involved in the contribution process. To do so, begin by navigating to the Manage Users menu as indicated. Then invite users by inputting their first name, last name, and email address, remembering to mark the user as maker or checker, or both, depending on their role. Then click Create. A success message will appear that looks like this. And the invitee will receive an email inviting them to click on an Access Account link to register their confidential access account. They'll need to create a password, select their country, and click on Create Account. If successful, they'll receive a message that looks like this. They can then hit Click here to log in and start using the Mansa platform. Now we can turn to the main task for the contributor organization: contributing their customer due diligence profile along with supporting evidentiary documents to enable easier verification. To create your organization's CDD profile, begin by entering your username and password to log into the My Workspace dashboard as shown. All menus and options available can be accessed from here. Next, click on Contribute from the left menu and select the relevant entity that have been registered from the list provided. You'll see that the contribution form consists of 6 steps, which are highlighted clearly across the top of the page. Click Continue when you're ready. To complete step 1, start by reviewing your entity details. You can select the appropriate verifier using the drop-down menu shown, or invite them by providing their email address. Afrexim Bank can also be selected as your verifier where yours is not yet available. When you're ready, click Continue. Step 2 relates to identification. You'll need to provide information and/or supporting document uploads under each of the headings shown. Identification, external auditors, business license document, company registration document, object of establishment document, and upload tax exemption certificate. Finally, select the independent reviewing/verification entity for this section. Then, when you're ready, click Save and Continue. Step 3 is concerned with ownership and management. Again, work carefully in sequence to provide the information or document uploads required under the headings: shareholders, shareholding structure, ultimate beneficial owners, declaration of ultimate beneficial owners document, board of directors, directors profile, executive management profiles, and organization structure. Again, select the independent reviewing/verification entity for this section. Then, when you're ready, click Save, then Continue. Step 4 is for your business information. This time, you will need to enter relevant details and/or upload documents under the headings: legal advisor, products and services information, and affiliates and branch network. Select the independent reviewing/verification entity for this section. Then click Save and Continue. To complete step 5, you'll need to provide all compliance information. This time, you provide your answers to the questions asked by using the drop-down menus on the right of the screen. Some responses may require you to provide additional information. Firstly, under various headings related to anti-money laundering. Then under the headlines shown for risk assessment, know your customer, reportable transactions, transaction monitoring, and AML training, as well as uploading any documentation requested. When all sections are complete, click Save and Continue. Step 6 is for financial information. Here you'll need to complete and/or upload all relevant information relating to annual financial reports, interim financial reports, and credit ratings. Then select the independent reviewing/verification entity for this section. And when you're ready, click Save and Continue. Step 7 is for other information concerning associations and memberships. Again, select the independent reviewing/verification entity for this section. Then click Save and Continue when you're ready. You'll now arrive at Step 8, a summary page of all the completed sections. Finally, to submit your contributor profile for the authoriser's review and approval, click on Complete. The platform will display a notification to let you know your profile has been submitted successfully.
And there you have it, folks. Please sign up today at mansaafrica.com, or you can contact any members of the Mansa business team at mansabusiness@afreximbank.com. So as we bring this event to a close, I'm going to invite the head of our Mansa initiative, Mrs. Maureen Mba, who's going to deliver our closing remarks. She was a member of the nuclear staff at AfreximBank. We affectionately call her Employee 001. Who also created the compliance department here at the bank and now heads the Mansa initiative here at AfreximBank. Mrs. Maureen Mba, you are welcome to take the floor, please.
Thank you, Adeze, for the brief introduction. Distinguished personalities, ladies and gentlemen, all protocols reserved. We wish to thank you immensely for joining us today to mark this important milestone that the bank has achieved. Listening to great minds expressing their thoughts and visions for a new Africa today, it is evident that the continent is on a solid pedestal and unlocking its several economic activities. There is no doubt that in today's economic world, information is gold. We want to thank all our panel discussants today who have actually contributed in their numerous ways to actually deliver and discuss the Mansa repository platform, which is Africa's new good. Listening to all of us today, we have taken, I think for me, I've taken a lot from this discussion, which will try to apply to our work in making sure that we get Mansa to where your expectations are. Of course, Professor Orama came up with came up to demonstrate the importance of this platform, how the idea was conceived, what we have done so far, how we've carried everybody along this journey, including African central banks, African entities, corporate entities, and the rest of them. And today, we are happy to say that Mansa is functional, is operational. We started onboarding in the month of May 2020. We would have gone further than where we are today, but of course we all know the COVID-19 has been a clog in the wheel in our economic activities globally. He talked about there's no transparency in business amongst us. We don't have that trust amongst us. The fragmented nature of our continent, of the countries, of African countries, has also added to these constraints. He also discussed the African Continental Free Trade Agreement, which is coming up very soon, and how Mansa will be a very important tool to its implementation. I'm listening to Mr. Ade Ayeyemi, the CEO for EcoBank. I was able to take a lot again from him. By the way, I congratulate you, sir, for the Elevate, which you just launched last Saturday. That is Women in Business. It was a very good and insightful occasion, and I hope they will all onboard the Mansa repository platform. Congratulations again. Now, you talked about the objective of Mansa, how Mansa will help to improve good behavior in the continent, how Mansa will create incentive to businesses, how Mansa will create transparency, how Mansa will transform Africa into a village. You talked about information is key. To our good board member, who also see Mansa as a game changer, Mr. Stefan Nelatambi. You also talked about the compliance, the issue of compliance on the continent, how your discussions internally, how it generates a lot of debate when it came to compliance issues. Making finance work for Africa, which has been one of the great initiatives you promoted at AFDB, also has been working with Mansa Repository Platform on how we can create that synergies to work together. You talked about trade finance gaps in Africa, and of course, the rejection of our trade applications because of non-compliance information. As we move ahead, we were able to look at again how you have seen Mansa as a very important tool that will enable us to improve businesses in Africa. From the Central Bank of Egypt, Dr. Nagla was quick to share with us how Mansa will again address different trading challenges in the continent. She was quick to intimate us of the contribution that Central Bank of Egypt has done towards developing Mansa and creating that awareness amongst our different publics, including actually signing an MOU to conduct trainings for all our African financial institutions, central banks, and of course, corporate entities, which we conducted about 8 series last year, 2019. And we were to start again this year because it's already embedded in their training program under the Egyptian Banking Institute, which is a training arm of the central bank. Incidentally, the COVID again did not allow us. There were so many discussions that talked about. She also talked about visibility, that Mansa will create visibility for the continent, for doing business in Africa, for different entities like the growing SMEs in the continent, and that will again create that access to financing. The president came back again to discuss, when asked, how do you think that the AfCTA implementation, how do you see Mansa being contributing to its implementation? The president was quick to say that the intra-African trade again Mansa will increase intra-African trade in the continent. It will also talk to the deficit of infrastructure, which is the main constraint to intra-African trade. It will also talk to, he actually dramatized it by talking about total African trade, total global trade, which is about 1 trillion. And of course, intra-African trade is talking to about 150 to 170 billion, and wondered why it is not up to 300 if actually intra-African trade has a major issue. He also talked about the risk associated with the global trade. And of course, he dramatized again by talking about how we don't trust ourselves. For instance, Cote d'Ivoire producing rubber and Nigeria importing from Malaysia. And all this put together, he thought that Mansa is the answer to these challenges. Mansa will create that visibility, create that transparency. Mansa will help you to grow your business. Mansa will bring that visibility to your business and attract international financing. There will also be domestic financing. Going to EcoBank again, Mr. Ayeyemi was quick to talk about the compliance cost. If not managed effectively, it will continue to escalate. And of course, he saw that for us to do that, we have to make sure that we start engaging at all levels, including governments, corporates, banks, for them to embrace the Mansa repository platform and understand that this is the go-to platform for every African entity, Africa-focused and for Africans. And that will, of course, create incentives and bring international financing to the continent. On illicit financial flow, Mr. Stefan Nelatambi was quick to again point out that Mansa will actually reduce illicit financial flow in the continent. It's a digitalized platform, and we know that digitization this day is the key word in every business. Every country globally is going digital. Level of discussions with government. He also encouraged discussions with governments, and he also talked about the UBOs, which is a critical part of any business, whereby owners of business are hidden behind the businesses and you don't know who is there. But with Mansa, all this will be discovered, and that will create that transparency we are looking at. On the light manufacturer, Dr. Orama was also able to give explanation and demonstrate how to go about it and what that will do to assist our great continent. The smaller players should be encouraged. Need for Mansa alone. Everybody should be a Mansa player. Dr. Rama was also, he also alluded to the fact that for you to be actually recognized as an entity on the continent, you must, and for you to gain access to the PAPS initiative, which the bank is rolling out in a couple of days, in a couple of months to come, you have to be you have to be Mansa verified. That gives you an ID that we call AEI, Africa Entity Identifier. So before you will be able to access the PAPS transaction, you must be AEI verified. You must have that code. It's automatic. Once you put your information on the platform, it's allotted to you. Of course, the president went further to talk about the PAPS, the benefits of PAPS, what it's going to do on the continent, and how we've been engaging, how the bank has been engaging with the different associations, chambers of commerce, stock exchanges, and the like, to ensure that everybody gets on the PAPS system. And for you to do that, you must be Mansa verified. As we listen to the discussions today, I must say that there are lots to learn. He talked about the benefits. EcoBank also informed that all sectors should be plugged into the Mansa repository. I must say thank you to, again, our different discussants today. I know time is against us. We also have to make sure that we see Mansa as Africa's new good. And this is the time for us to all of us embrace this important initiative. It is our initiative. It is for us, built for us. There are also other issues of how we should look at the supply chains, make sure that we bring all the small players into that supply chain, that value chain, so that they will start reaping the benefits of the Mansa repository platform. And again, the AFDB signaled that Africa means for us to actually grow stronger, we must show signal that Africa means business. And that means we must be involved in the Mansa repository platform, because it is the pillar, or we may say that it is the tool that will give us that prominence in businesses, in what we do. It will create that trust. It will make us start trading amongst ourselves. As we close, Mr. Adeyemi came up with, of course, he dramatized his point by using the COVID pandemic, COVID-19 pandemic, and told us that this is all about how we should look at Mansa as well. it is the right time and it is the right measure to take for us to make sure that we all live up to expectations, and also to ensure that we start creating that visibility and compare our businesses and develop them accordingly. Mansa, when asked what are the expectations of AfreximBank from the continent as regards the Mansa repository platform, the president said that all of us must be involved. All of us in the continent should see Mansa as the go-to platform, should see Mansa as Africa's new good. We all have to be an industrialized nation. And for us to create that industrialized nation, we must increase intra-African trade, value addition, encouraging trading amongst ourselves, and of course, build that trust, build that transparency, and make sure that where we have the information gap, we start providing those information. He also talked about how the bank has been working with the AU to ensure that Mansa is adopted as Africa's customer due diligence hub, and all African, which entails all African countries, all African governments, to encourage every entity, irrespective of what sector of the economy you are, to onboard the Mansa repository platform. In having said this, we all see that today we have actually marked another milestone. And this important milestone is very key to all of us. We are urging everybody, just like the president said, we are urging everybody, every entity to embrace the Mansa platform. We are urging all of us to be the ambassador, the Mansa ambassador on the continent, wherever we are, wherever we're doing business. We should encourage it, because that will create that visibility we are looking for. And that will again encourage investors to come into the continent. And that will again impact our trade, intra-African trade, trade finance, all types of transactions we are doing. Mansa will play a very critical role. So Mansa is the answer, and Mansa is the solution to all our trade transactions in Africa. On that note, may I just say thank you all for listening, and we actually wish you every luck, and we see you onboarding the Mansa repository platform very soon. Thank you very much. Adeze, back to you.
Operational launch of the Mansa repository platform. Please keep an eye out on our social media platforms for more information, which we will be sharing very, very shortly. MansaAfrica.com is the website, and please feel free to email any member of the Mansa team at mansabusiness@AfreximBank.com. So thank you all again for joining us for the second event in our Resilient Africa series. Follow up with us, or follow us on social media and join in on the conversation. Our handles are AfreximBank on LinkedIn, Twitter, and Facebook, and AfreximBank Official on Instagram. Keep your eyes out again on the social media pages, because we will have a lot of information coming to you. I know it does sound a little cheesy, but the truth is Mansa is the answer. So thank you once again for joining us. My name is Adeza Anyoku. Thank you all. Have a wonderful day.